So I just want to give you a story of the power of participatory research from my own experience. I was working with colleagues from IDS and Praxis India with a group of cotton mill workers in Tamil Nadu, young women, mostly 18 to 24. They're mostly illiterate. A few were able to read and write. They collected stories from each other, about 300 stories, and they analyzed them and produced an incredibly comprehensive systemic analysis of their own situation and the various causalities which led to different outcomes. That analysis then led to the creation of action research groups. And the action research groups explored a range of issues, one of which was why they were so dependent on the moneylenders. And how that led to their employment in the cotton mills. So the group decided that they were going to do a full-scale survey of all of their village to look at what they spent their money on. And they were quite surprised by the results. So they discovered that a large amount of money was being given as contributions to the temple. And another big chunk of money was being spent on marriages and gifts as sort of exchange relationships between families. A third chunk of money was repayments to the moneylender. And a fourth big area of expenditure was alcohol. And there were some other ones, but essentially basics like food, shelter, clothing, and other important issues like education came out at around 20% of their total income. And if you think these are bonded laborers that have the tiniest income that you can imagine, then you can see how small that amount of money is. So they decided that they had to do something about it. They went to the temple and they negotiated the amount of money that they had been paying down to 25% of what it was before. And then they decided that they weren't going to do large, expensive weddings and exchange gifts in the village anymore. They just couldn't afford to do it. So they started to think about alternatives. And they essentially kicked the moneylenders out of the village and stopped them coming in and lending money to individuals. And they closed down the liquor stores. So this is an example of a community analyzing their own situation, looking at where they could make changes, taking that action, and then opening up the door to be able to have a different sort of household financial situation so that they weren't dependent on the moneylenders and they weren't dependent on that bonded work in the cotton mills. That story was picked up by 8 other action research groups, and then it spread more widely into a whole network of local NGOs. So you can start to see the potential for transformational change which builds from participatory research. That's just one example, but a powerful example. And the handbook is filled with different examples at different scales of how this sort of transformational change can be achieved.